Our objective is to build the family tree of humanity, all of God's children.
Elder Kevin S. Hamilton,
General authority in the family history department.
You were released 6 months ago.
People feel that and want to belong to a family. Why does your church spend all this money to gather family history? These archives are all at risk. One drone strike and they're gone. We need to go faster.
Where do you even start?
The first presidency became concerned about records in Africa. We were tasked to extract the oral history before these elders passed away. And we will have published by the end of this year something like, in this case, they're not members of the church, but they clearly feel something. You ask them, why do you do this? They typically say, I really don't know. I have this drive to understand where I come from. I met the head archivist for the Ukraine, very much on guard, didn't make much progress. But the Lord softened his heart. Not a member of the church, bearing his testimony about the power of FamilySearch. Almost every country on earth had people at RootsTech. But about 90% are not members of the church. We're working with Google and Facebook right now. We're going to develop facial recognition technology. We're going to identify all the people in that box of photos. Don't throw them away.
Is there anything that you think that people would be surprised to know about?
Well, most people have grown up around this. They think that family history is kind of what Aunt Sally does. You know, she's kind of the family historian. She does all the genealogy for the family. But increasingly, we've tried to make it simpler and easier and more accessible so that everybody can do it. Young people, old people, people of any nationality, everybody can get engaged. And we watch this across the earth as people come to FamilySearch and interact with FamilySearch. FamilySearch is our free genealogy service that we provide to the world. There's a website, FamilySearch.org. We have mobile apps. We have probably the world's largest database. We've been gathering records for 130 some years, since the 1890s. And we now have this enormous collection of records from almost every country on earth. And the people that use FamilySearch are mostly not members of our faith. There's 17 million Latter-day Saints currently. We have tens of millions of people that come to FamilySearch and use FamilySearch.
You said tens of millions?
Tens of millions, yeah. Last year in 2024, we had 8.5 million new subscribers, people that came to FamilySearch. They liked what they saw. They said, sign me up, I want a free account. And of the 8.5 million or so that came last year, 98% were not members of our faith. And they came from almost every country on earth, including countries you would be surprised at, People's Republic of China, Russia, North Korea. Places where you would think who would be interested in family history from those countries, yet they come via the internet, with worldwide reach, and it's a really remarkable phenomenon.
People from all over the world, 2% of members, they arrest 98%.
Yeah.
And they're fascinated by this.
You ask them, whenever I run into these non-members that are using FamilySearch, and you talk to them, you say, why do you do this? They typically say, I really don't know. Other than I want to connect, I want to belong, I want to be part of a family. I have this drive, this passion to understand where I come from, know my roots. And it's a very deeply felt, emotional, passionate response. President Nelson used to say that the spirit of Elijah, which we sometimes call this phenomenon, the spirit of Elijah, he says, is actually the Holy Ghost bearing testimony to God's children of the divine nature of the family. And in this case, they're not members of the church, but they clearly feel something. They are driven to find their ancestry, to find their roots. And they come, again, by the millions to FamilySearch to participate. We run a little conference every year called RootsTech.
Yeah.
It's downtown at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City. Typically, we'd get 20 or 25,000 people to come, and it would be 3 or 4 days, wonderful conference. With the pandemic, we couldn't do it in person. We couldn't gather, so we decided to do an online version of RootsTech. And the first year we had a little over 1 million people show up, 1.5 million people show up. The second year we had like 3 million. The next year was like 5 or 6 million. And last year we had almost 12 million.
12 million.
And they came from, I think it was 243 countries, different countries. And there's only, I think the United Nations recognizes 250 countries worldwide. So almost every country on earth had people at RootsTech participating in family history. And again, we don't really advertise it. I don't know how they find out about it, but they do, and they come, and they engage, they participate. We've now gone back to a hybrid model. It's an in-person format, so you can come to the Salt Palace. It's in late February, early March every year, or online. So it's the silver lining of the pandemic was we have this huge reach now of RootsTech. It's
something that you wouldn't have considered before.
No, we wouldn't have done that.
And so now it opens up the gate. Do you have any numbers on? Can you tell if there are members or not that are signing up?
Some we can. I mean, we can cross-match against those that have accounts with FamilySearch. We guesstimate, educated guess, that about 90% of those coming to RootsTech are not members of the church. So they're, again, from all over the world. A lot of people coming from the Middle East, which is interesting. Hundreds of thousands from Asia. Millions from Latin America, millions from Europe and North America.
Wow! And so it just keeps building and building.
Yeah, this is a huge addressable market. I mean, we're 8 billion people on the earth today, and internet connectivity has given reach that we never had before. I mean, back in the days of paper and physical libraries, people had to come to Salt Lake City to do genealogy.
Yeah.
But today, with a smartphone or a tablet or a desktop computer, you can access all of that.
It's all connected. It's just connecting the dots over and over and over again, right? With all the different data points, right? And now they have access to all of that data.
Yeah.
Wow. Is there anything else that you think that people would be surprised to know about?
Well, we're very busy gathering records all over the earth. We have teams of camera crews that are out digitizing archives for paper-based records. So most of the Western world has some sort of a birth certificate, death certificate, marriage certificate archived away somewhere. And we're working diligently to gather those records. We go into these archives with digital cameras and photograph all those records. Using technology like artificial intelligence, we're able now to convert those images to searchable records where it's actually digital information. It's a birth date and a death date and a birthplace and a family name and all the descendants. And we've used AI in a way that we're actually able not only to translate the records or what we call index the records, but we can actually build trees, build family trees. We can recognize this is a father and this is a mother and these are children and these are grandparents. And we now, using technology, can many, many times faster and much more accurately take raw data and build family trees, which then the people that come to FamilySearch can connect into and find their family members, find their ancestors. So that's one thing that's been very exciting with technology.
So in the past, you'd have to come to Salt Lake and do a lot of the research. Now this technology is enabling people to just take the photograph, and then that data can then be connected to various data points that are building these family trees. So now it's easier for anybody just for the first time to already they open it up, it's already there.
Yeah, I can actually access on this device, any smartphone, any internet-connected device, I can access the entire library, almost the entire library at FamilySearch. There's a few records that require on-site access because of some privacy rights and things, but almost our entire collection is now available online. And so with internet connectivity, you can connect from anywhere.
So are there any misconceptions that you think? Because you mentioned before how I think a lot of people think of family history as, that's what my mom or grandma used to do.
Yeah, that's what
and
old
now
people
it's
do.
completely changing. You
Yeah.
said, I mean, even the numbers you've told me, it's obvious that it's changing. What are some
Well, I'll
misconceptions?
share another data point with you. So in 2011, Elder David A. Bednar gave a talk in General Conference, October 2011, and the title of the talk was "The Hearts of the Children Shall Turn." And it's in Gospel Library, it's online. But in that talk, he invited the youth of the church to engage in family history. And memorably, he said something, I'll paraphrase, but he said, "Your thumbs were not made simply to tweet and text, but you were brought forth at this time to engage in the work of salvation and exaltation." And then he invited them to engage and become part of the gathering and part of the work of family history. At the time, I went back and kind of double-checked. We had something like less than 2,000 youth worldwide that submitted a name to the temple for a temple ordinance under the age of 18. Last year, and probably this year will be even higher, we were somewhere over 200,000 youth that submitted names to the temple. And so this is the digital generation. They get the technology. They're very comfortable with it. And there's something about finding and connecting and discovering your ancestors, your family, that's very appealing to the rising generation. They like this. They enjoy it. They find it fascinating. And I've given firesides and devotionals all over the world to youth, and to watch their eyes light up when they realize, I can do this. So if they have a smartphone or access to a computer in almost any language, they can come to FamilySearch. They can find family names. They can submit those names to the temple. And then ideally, if they're close enough to a temple, they can take those names to the temple and perform the baptisms and confirmations in the temple. And so this has been a huge uptake with our youth. And I see it eventually, this will be kind of a normal and natural part of growing up in the church. I do temple and family history work. I find names, I use FamilySearch, I go to the temple, I perform ordinances.
Any stories that you can think of as you've gone around and you've shared this? Is anybody that comes to mind? Is there anybody that comes to mind that was impactful, that you could see, wow, okay, I've been over the past decade, over a decade, I've been a general authority.
Well, I've watched the impact on lots of our children. There was an interesting study done by a scholar. It was published in the New York Times. I'm trying to remember his name, David. It'll come to me. About 4 or 5 years ago, there was an article in the New York Times. But in this study, they did testing, and they discovered that children that knew their family narrative, that knew their family story, that knew something about their grandparents and their great-grandparents and even their great-great-grandparents, children that knew the stories, knew the narratives, knew the family history of their family were more emotionally resilient, had less anxiety, and were able to deal with adversity in a much more powerful way than those that didn't. And they had all kinds of data. They did these double-blind tests and ran all these kids through this. And they said the conclusion was, when you learn who you are and when you learn your family's story, there's this kind of a narrative that comes bubbling up to the surface, which is, I can do hard things because my great-grandparents did hard things, and my grandparents did hard things, and my parents did hard things. I can do this. I can weather the storm. I can deal with adversity. I can deal with setback. We had a little not funny, but a little fun little incident in our personal family. During the pandemic, all of our kids were locked down. Our grandkids, were doing home school, online school. They hated it. And my wife went back and found the stories of during the diphtheria pandemic here in Utah, about the same time as the Spanish flu pandemic in the rest of the world. and how these families had to quarantine. And many of our families had written in their journals the effect of the flu, of the pandemic, the difficulty of being quarantined for weeks and months on end. And as we shared those stories back with our grandchildren and kind of related their current situation to the situation of 100 years ago, all of a sudden you could see them kind of take on a different attitude about this. Okay, my family's done this before. We'll get through this. We can do it again. So that's just one example of how these stories tend to strengthen and fortify the rising generation.
Well, I've even seen those videos on, I think Ancestry.com. They have a show, and it's the genealogist, and he brings, I'm talking like very, very famous people, celebrities.
Yeah.
And he'll reveal to them, he'll do their genealogy.
Yeah.
They'll put the results on the table. These are some celebrities that have never seen, they don't even know who their dad is.
Yeah.
And they'll sit there and they'll weep.
Yeah, it's very touching.
It's very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, this is, it's universal. It kind of cuts across every nationality, every ethnicity, every language. People care deeply about their families, and they want to connect. They want to belong to a family. And FamilySearch now provides the tools and provides the data that allows people to connect. I'll give you another example.
Yeah.
And I know will cut close to you too. You have African American heritage.
I do.
Yeah. So most African Americans or African Caribbeans or African Europeans, they came out of Africa during the slave and the enslavement periods, and they can only trace their ancestry back to kind of their port of entry where they began to keep records.
Yeah, where the slave trade was.
Or whatever the slave trade records or the early census records would have slave information on there, slave people. So about 8 years ago, I was actually serving in Africa at the time as in an area presidency. We were living in Johannesburg, and I served in an area presidency for 5 years that was all of sub-Saharan Africa. And the first presidency became concerned about records in Africa. And we learned and we had discovered that most African tribes do not have written records. They have oral records. And in almost every village, there was somebody, usually designated as kind of the village rememberer, that would be tasked to remember the genealogies of the village back generations. Some of these village rememberers can remember 15, 20, even 25 generations. And it's in their heads, and they can recite it, and it's an oral tradition.
And it goes all the way back.
As far as they can remember. So we were tasked at FamilySearch, to go into these villages and develop a way to extract the oral histories before these elders passed away. And so we began a pilot, and it grew, and we developed some technology around it. We developed an app that runs on a smartphone, and we built some service centers in Ghana and Kenya. And we began to gather these oral histories. We engaged hired contractors. Today we have about 4,500 contractors in 21 countries scattered across the continent of Africa. And they are in the villages, in the native languages, in the native dialects, interviewing these elders, gathering these oral genealogies. And this year we'll get up somewhere either just past or close to our 2 millionth interview in a village.
2 million.
2 millionth interview in a village. And we will have published by the end of this year something like 500 million records that we've gathered out of these oral genealogies. So now think about this, Stevens. For the first time, we'll have a database of African genealogy going back generations. And for African Americans or African Europeans or African Caribbeans, African Brazilians, we'll be able to connect them back into their tribal villages, maybe using DNA, maybe using just old-fashioned genealogical techniques, but we'll connect them into this database. And those that have African heritage will find rich data on their families. We'll be able to connect people back generations that was heretofore unknowable. And so that's just another example of how we're trying to think a little bit outside the box. I was always deeply grateful that the first presidency would have the inspiration to do this and provide the funding. It's not cheap, but provide the funding to be able to go and to search out and document this African genealogy, oral history.
This is very interesting to me because I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges that I face. I mean, whenever I do genealogy, so my mom is white, my dad is black. My mom's side, I can get a name. If they do the FamilySearch, hey, pull up who you're related to. People I'm related to, they never think of my mom, right?
Right.
But on my dad's side, it's never the case. And I think that it goes back to, because even in the slave trade, and then in the United States, there's a lot of slaves were just, after a while, they're just numbers. There's
Right.
on a sheet. I know they've done projects for that too, but even beyond that, like where do you even start?
Yeah.
Right? When it gets to Africa, and you're saying now,
Most African Americans can, with a little effort, get back to kind of their port of entry, where they came into the colonies or into the United States. But getting across the pond, across the Atlantic to Africa, that's almost impossible. And so we're going to make that database. We're publishing it. We've published a lot of it already. We're working to get the rest of it published, and we'll continue to expand that. It's been so successful that now we've gone and we've taken not just African oral history, but we have projects in the Philippines where we have indigenous people without written records. We're doing work in Papua New Guinea. We're doing work on the Navajo Nation here in the United States.
Really?
Where they have no written records, but they have an oral tradition. People know in their heads what the genealogies of their families are. And our job is to extract that information before these people pass on. Because once they die, then we lose it.
I just wanted to take a second to remind you that we actually have an episode that we recorded with Elder Wilson. He formerly served with President Nelson as the director of the Temple Department, and gives some good perspective and background. And I think that these two conversations go hand in hand. So if you haven't already, the link is tagged in this video as well. Let's get you back to the conversation. You've been to, you spent a lot of time in Africa, and I think that's fascinating. You spent time all over the world doing this. Are there any other miracles that you've seen?
So I think one of the miracles that has been fun to watch is the hearts of the gatekeepers soften and open. We always, in our department, we've used the story of Nephi and his brothers going back to Jerusalem to get the plates. And they first went and they tried to buy the plates from Laban, and Laban chased them out. And then they went and first they went and asked for the plates, he chased them out. Then they went and tried to buy the plates, he chased them out. And finally they found Laban, and Nephi was commanded to slay Laban. And then he, as impersonating Laban, went, and Zoram was the one that actually gave him the plates. Well, in 1 Nephi chapter 5, when they got back to Sarah and Lehi, the first thing they learned when they opened the plates was it contained a genealogy.
That's right.
Of their fathers. And so I think it's so interesting. We have the Labans of the world. These are usually heads of state, the ministers of departments, of governments. But it's actually the Zorams that are the gatekeepers to the records. And they're the archivists. They're the librarians. They're the ones that are actually maintaining and keeping the treasury, keeping the archives. And so we have spent a lot of time and effort over, the past 10 or 20 or 15 years seeking out these Zorams across the world, building relationships, educating them, trying to help them understand what we do and why we do it, and then helping them to partner with us so that we can come in and digitize their records and make them available. And our pitch is usually pretty simple. Your records are here. They're basically paper records, inaccessible. We will digitize your entire collection, which A, will preserve it forever, and B, will make it accessible. And it's a pretty good value proposition, and we do it for free. We won't charge you for it. We'll do it because we're interested in preserving records and publishing them. So I have seen archive after archive after archive all over the world where they come into our meetings. We come to them, they come to us. They're very skeptical. They're very skittish
They're skeptical
about having any relationship. And as we start to teach them the why, and this is what I've learned, is we can be very transparent. The question behind the question is always, why do you do this? Why do you guys even care? And we teach them the plan of salvation. We teach them God's plan for his children and how it requires that we seal families together in our temples, and we need the information to be able to do that. And as I have been in those meetings and as I've helped teach those concepts, and we try to do it in very simple language. We try not to use any Latter-day Saint speak, try to just plain English or plain French or plain Spanish, whatever language we're speaking. And we try to teach them why we do this. I have seen over and over this light bulb go off where they go, oh, this is about family. And this is about preserving and strengthening family. I'm for that. I want to be part of that. And we've seen these archivists, the Zorams of the world, soften their hearts and ultimately become great collaborators. And we have projects going on all over Europe and Asia and Latin America and the Pacific, where we're working with states and churches and governments and academics and archives and libraries to preserve their records, publish the records, index the records using technology usually, and making that accessible so that the people of the world can find the records and create their family trees.
This is amazing. Are there any particular stories that come to mind? And I'm just curious of what that conversation would look like, having, using, explaining the plan of salvation. And
well, I remember the first time I met the head archivist for the National Archives of the Ukraine. It was at a conference in Paris, France. And I was introduced to him. We weren't doing any work with him yet. He was a tall, dignified gentleman, very cordial, but quite stiff, very much on guard. And we chatted a bit, told him what we were trying to do, didn't make much progress. We then invited him to come to RootsTech, which he did. And he came, it was probably 2018 or 2019, he came to RootsTech, and for the first time he saw, wait a minute, there's a whole world of people that are interested in our records. And the Ukraine's an interesting country. A lot of Americans have Ukrainian heritage. There was a lot of out migration, a lot of immigration from the Ukraine to the U.S. back in the 1800s and 1900s. And so there's a lot of demand for Ukrainian records. So finally, he softened, and we began a project which we started just before the outbreak of the Russian hostilities in the Ukraine. And at the time, I think we had 12 camera crews operating in the Ukraine. And we were, once the war broke out, we evacuated everybody back to Frankfurt for safety reasons. And within just a couple of days, maybe 3 or 4 days, our area manager for Europe got a phone call from this gentleman, the head archivist for the Ukraine. He said, "Where are the camera crews?" And our area manager said, "Well, we had to pull them out because of the war." He says, "You don't understand. We need to go faster, not slower. These archives are all at risk. One drone strike, one missile strike, and they're gone, and gone forever. We need all of this digitized as soon as possible. I need 100 camera crews." So today, or at least the last time I looked, I think we had 74 camera crews busily archiving, digitizing archives in the Ukraine so we could capture those records, safely store the images in the cloud, and make that data available for posterity forever. The Lord, this is not a member of the church, but the Lord softened his heart, worked on him in a way that was miraculous. He has become a wonderful friend, a very powerful ally, and has gone to other archives around Europe he doesn't say it this way, but bearing his testimony about the power of FamilySearch and the goodness of FamilySearch, and has opened a lot of doors for us, frankly, throughout Europe. And so you kind of see that, the hand of the Lord, softening hearts, engaging people, helping people to understand so that we can go in and do what we do.
What do you think was the catalyst moment that where did you see the biggest switch for him?
When he finally understood that real people, it wasn't just an academic exercise, that real people were hungry for his information, for the records of the Ukrainian Empire. All of a sudden he goes, yeah, this is my duty. This is my life's work, is to preserve these records and make them available to other people so that they can use them for whatever purposes, building their family trees.
Identity.
And it just flipped a switch in his mind. He went from pretty aloof to 100% supportive, very collaborative.
And he still is.
Very much.
75.
Yeah, I think I've been gone now for 6 months, but I think we'll be more or less done with the Ukrainian project in the next year or so. I think we'll have all of the archives in the Ukraine digitized. There's something like 100 archives or something, but it's a big project.
It matters to people, right? Identity matters. Like making that connection back to family. Any other stories like that? Any other projects or areas where you've seen miracles?
Well, I think the oral history thing we've talked about, that's been one that when we get into these villages and people start talking and start reciting their genealogies, the whole village will gather together, and everybody, a lot of times they'll say, oh, no, it wasn't that, it was this. And they'll start correcting each other, and we take it all and create the trees. I think that almost every country I've been to, even if people start with kind of a steel shell, hard outer shell, as they begin to talk about their family, and that's how I oftentimes will launch the conversation. I'll say, tell me about your family. Where are you from? What's your heritage? And as people begin to talk about their family and about their roots, and I wish I knew more about this, or I know about this, and I'm so proud of my ancestry, you see people just light up. And I think the thing I've learned, Stephen, is family is the universal message. It cuts across every belief, every denomination, every government format. It is just the universal message. Almost everybody cares about their family. I've been in lots of places where people weren't too interested in religion, where people didn't have a lot of interest in talking about religion, or even our religion, or any religion for that matter. But I have rarely been rebuffed when I lead with family, when I talk to people about family. And I think increasingly our missionaries are figuring this out too. Preach My Gospel now has a pretty good section on how to use family history to help people find out about Jesus Christ, to find out about the restored gospel. And I have seen lots of missions around the earth where it's not the only message that we have. We have lots of messages, and it's not the only tool in our toolbox, but it's an interesting tool. If somebody's not interested in religion, not interested in the message of the restoration, well, another thing we do is we help people discover their family history. I remember 2 missionaries sent me a picture of a sister in Birmingham, Alabama, and she was an African-American sister, and they said they went to her apartment and she chased them away saying, stop bothering people here, they already have their own religion. Mm. And as she was literally chasing them out of the building, one of the missionaries turned to her and said, you know, another thing we do is we help people with their family history. And this 58, 59-year-old African-American woman, she kind of stopped. She goes, what did you say? He said, another thing we do is we help people with their family history. And she go, well, I am interested in that. My sister and I were just talking about this. How can you help me? And so they made an appointment to take her to their local family history center at the stake center there at the church. And they introduced her to a family history consultant, and they began to work with her. Long story short, after a few weeks, she started asking questions about the gospel, was taught by the missionaries. The picture they sent me was at her baptism. where she was
Really?
baptized. And her little testimony was, I am so excited to go to the temple in 2 weeks to perform baptisms for my family. Wow. And so, that's
That's beautiful.
a lot of stories like that you hear as you talk to the missionaries and others.
Family's a big deal.
Family's a big deal.
And even as I hear you talk about it, I can feel that it matters to you.
It does.
What do you think is at stake if we don't do that then? If we don't, it sounds like miracles are happening.
I think this is what Malachi prophesied when he said that if this did not happen, the earth would be smitten with a curse. I think the earth would not fulfill its fundamental purpose, which was to provide a mortal experience for God's children, help them find the gospel of Jesus Christ, help them receive the ordinances, make the covenants, return home to the presence of God. That's the purpose of the earth. And if we don't do this, if somehow it gets frustrated, which I don't believe it will, but if it did, all of that would be for naught.
It just makes me think about Joseph Smith getting his first mission call, right? And he's saying the earth would be utterly wasted at his coming. It would be for naught.
Yeah.
And that's the mission. And you're saying that FamilySearch, that's the mission, is to connect the family of the entire world. That's a very powerful mission.
The goal is to build the family tree of humanity, but God's purpose is so that he can seal families together in temples. So the FamilySearch is the means to the end. But without the names, without the trees, without these genealogies, we couldn't do the work in the temples. And it's interesting, as we build temples in more and more far-flung places like Papua New Guinea and some of the islands of the Pacific and Latin America, a lot of those places we don't have many names. Mongolia, we have a temple announced in Mongolia. We need to find family trees in Mongolia. So we're busy. We're busy everywhere. People say, "What's the business plan of FamilySearch?" I always say, "It's easy. Just listen to General Conference. Wherever they announce temples, that's where we're headed. That's where we go. We've got to support those temples with the names and the family trees needed for temple work."
Would you have ever imagined that you'd be doing this in your life?
No, I would not have. In fact, when I was called to this position by President Nelson in 2018, my thought to myself was, are you sure you don't mean my sister? She's actually the one that knows genealogy in our family. But I went forward, dug in, have learned a lot, and have been just thrilled to be part of it and to be able to participate.
As you look back, you were released 6 months ago, roughly. What's been the biggest change that you've seen within you working in the work of salvation on both sides of the veil?
I think my personal biggest change has been, one, I've been able to reconnect a little better with some of my children and grandchildren. I've got more time now to actually be there and be present and visit and attend the baptisms and the baby blessings. That's been terrific. But for me personally and for my wonderful wife, we have rededicated ourselves to being in the temple more often. We have a little bit more flexibility now in our schedule. And so we're in the temple every week. We're performing all the ordinances, washings and anointings, and the endowment, the sealings to parents, sealings to children. And we have really felt a renewal of the Spirit as we've done that. It's been wonderful, and I look forward to it. I love to be in the temple. I love to take my family names to the temple. I did my 6th great-grandfather the other day, his endowment. And I would have thought it would have been done long ago, but when I did the work, I saw that he had not been endowed, so I pulled his name and took it to the temple. It was sweet. There was a sweet connection there. I don't know anything about him. I know where he lived, where he died. I don't know as much about his life, really nothing about his life. But I know that if I did know him, if I knew him face to face, when I know him face to face, I'll feel the same way about him that I feel for my dad, who I love. He's my family. He's my sixth great grandfather, but he's my family, and I will love him as deeply and profoundly as I love my own father. And so these are sweet experiences that we've been experiencing. And the good news is it's open and available to every member of the church. Everybody can have these experiences. We have tried to make FamilySearch so easy that everybody can do it. Anybody can do it. And taking a family-related name to the temple is a very tender, sweet experience. It's just a different experience. You can go to the temple and do any name, but to take a family name it's powerful.
It is. It changes you. I can just feel it as you're saying it now. Even just the way that you're expressing it to me, how important it is to you.
Yeah.
How meaningful it is to you. When you look forward to, you've done all this work over the past decade. What do you see coming that you hope to see that members may not be aware of, that are in the making, that in the trajectory that it is on, that we'd hopefully be able to do?
Well, I think there's some really exciting things that we've not really even begun to tap into yet. One is DNA. I think it's interesting. President Oaks one time said to me, no, I'm sorry, it was President Nelson. He said, I find it interesting that our Heavenly Father gave us a roadmap to the entire human race in every cell of our body. He said, that can't be an accident. So we don't really understand a lot about DNA yet, to be honest. I know that there are commercial companies out there doing it. FamilySearch is not engaged much in DNA. But I think ultimately this roadmap that we have literally in every cell of our body will unlock a lot of secrets. I think a lot of the brick walls that we deal with now, where we just can't get past a certain generation, a certain date, a certain dead end to a family line, I think a lot of those are going to be solved through DNA. DNA is very accurate. You get 50% of your DNA from your father and 50% from your mother. So if you find somebody else that has part of your DNA, 100% you're related. The question is how, how far back, what's the gap, what's our common ancestor. And so knowing that, I really believe that our Heavenly Father has, knowing the end from the beginning and being infinitely wise and powerful, He'll open doors and provide ways, and more technology will come that will help us to connect in ways that we currently can't connect. We've focused for the last 130 years on paper records because that's what we had: birth certificates, death certificates, marriage licenses, christening records. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to the Catholic Church because they kept very careful records, starting in about the 1600s going forward. But we estimate that maybe 60% of the world, or 60% of the Earth's population from his historical population, probably doesn't have a paper record. They were born in an era without paper records, or the records were destroyed, or it wasn't their tradition. That's why this oral history that we're doing in Africa and other parts of the world is interesting to me, to see how else can we gather this information if we don't have paper records. And that's why DNA is interesting to me, because ultimately I think we do have a record. God's children are numbered, they're named, they're known. The sparrow won't fall, the hair of the head won't be lost. I mean, He knows His children perfectly. And because of that, I think He will help us to identify His children and help us to organize His children and put them into family relationships and document that for the very purpose of doing temple work, being able to do their temple ordinances and help them move from spirit prison to spirit paradise.
So if there's somebody watching this, they're listening to this, and they want to feel the Savior's influence in their life through family history, how could they do that? Where would they begin?
This is kind of what my story, my pitch to archivists has been over the years. The question behind the question is always, why do you do this? Why does your church spend all this time and effort and money and resources to gather family history? And the answer is because God loves His children, and he wants them to have all that he has and has provided a plan and a path that enables them to return to his presence as families. And that requires that we be sealed together as families in temples, that we receive these ordinances in temples and make these covenants. And this is the way we do it. This is the practical application of the gathering of scattered Israel. We do it in temples, we do it in baptismal fonts, and we do it with family records and family history. And as we bring these things together and help people to make the covenants, they then receive the blessings of our Heavenly Father. For members of the church to participate in this, the great blessing is they become closer to God and they become more comfortable in His presence. The reason why we go to the temple is so that we are comfortable in the presence of God. Ultimately, we will all stand at the bar of judgment to be judged, and we will need to be comfortable in His presence. And this is one of the ways we become comfortable with God. And He wants us to be there. He desires that we be in the temple. People always ask me, they go,
What is that?
I got a box of photos with no names on it. What should I do? Should I just throw them away? I go, no, hang on to them. We're going to develop the technology. We're working with Google and Facebook right now, and either we'll develop it or they'll develop it. We're going to develop facial recognition technology. We'll then match that up to our database of family names. We're going to identify all the people in that box of photos. We'll know who they are. Don't throw them away.
So people have boxes in their house. They're like, I have no idea who these photos are from my family.
Hang on to them.
Hang on to them.
Or
Don't let them-
digitize them. Digitize them, put them in FamilySearch, and we'll get to them in the next 10 years. But we're going to know who all those people are. We'll know the people, and then we'll figure out the facial recognition, and we'll marry those two together, and we'll identify those photos.
What?
Google has something like 1 trillion photos in Google Photos right now. And they're very carefully just extracting that data.
It does it in my own phone. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, this is your son, and it's
Yeah.
it's accurate.
Yeah.
And it's even though they're different.
Yeah,
My sons, I had 4 sons, and they look very similar. And
yeah,
like, no,
that
that's-
technology is all coming. We're going to get to the bottom of that here shortly, I think.
I think that one of the biggest concerns, and I know we've talked a lot about technology and artificial intelligence. A lot of people worry about security. What would you say about that could give somebody a little bit of comfort to know that it's not just they're not there? Maybe there is some concerns.
Well, privacy is a huge issue. Every nation on earth right now is kind of wrestling through their privacy laws, and the EU kind of most aggressive on this, trying to restrict access because of privacy. FamilySearch complies with every possible privacy law there is. We go out of our way to make sure we're in compliance. We will depublish information if it violates privacy laws, even if it was legal and now becomes illegal because of recently enacted privacy. But I would say this, we're not so much interested in private data, we're interested in family relationships. And so our goal is to try to identify individuals with enough information that we can then link them into a family and link the families together into a tree of families. And so we don't need to know a lot of detailed information about people. We just need to know enough that that is a unique, identified person, not to be confused with somebody else. China, for example, a lot of times with these clan genealogies, we know the family name, we know the family birth date or the individual birth date, and we know the sex. They're all males. And so we'll do temple work for Mr. Wong, born about 1450. And we'll seal him to Mrs. Wong, born about 1450. We know they exist. We know they have a family. They have offspring. So that's enough. With not a lot of data, we can do temple work. So we're very careful around privacy, and we just try to get the work done that we need to get done with still respecting the privacy laws.
Is that everything you'd say? What would be? Is that probably the biggest part that you would say that people will ask about or inquire about privacy?
Interesting. Most individuals are not that concerned about privacy yet. Maybe they will become in the future, but it's more of at the government level that we run into these problems. Governments are trying to enact laws There's a movement in Europe right now called the right to be forgotten, where if you hold data as a credit card company or a bank or a school or a church, whatever, if people request, you have to demonstrate that you can completely expunge, erase everything related to them so that they don't exist anymore in your database, which is problematic. I mean, who
can?
we're trying not to forget people, but that is a movement that has gained some traction in Europe right now, is this right to be forgotten. I want my name erased. Don't ask me why, but that there is a movement out there.
If you could sit down and talk to the rising generation based on your experience over the past decade of working as a general authority, and even specifically lately in family history, what would you tell them?
Let me summarize this is my heartfelt feeling after having watched over this now for many years, been able to see the hand of the Lord, the Lord's prophet. I've watched this. When I think about this entire the temples and family history and technology and the miracles and the doors opening, the worldwide effort, the non-members, all of this, when I think about it, the word that comes into my heart is there's hope. I'm so hopeful about this. The Lord's got this. He's in charge. It's His work. We're His children. He can do everything and anything, and He is, in fact, opening the doors and providing the means to do what we've been asked to do. I love the fact that the brethren are so optimistic. When I'm with the First Presidency and the 12, that's one of the things I just take away is they're a pretty cheerful group. There's a lot of things that we're concerned about, but they are seers. They see the future. They see around the corner. There is great optimism. There is great hope for the future. If I was a young person, I would be ecstatic to be born at this time in this place. There's hope. The Lord's got this. He's in charge. It's His work. And that really is my testimony, that this work will go forward in a remarkable way. The temples will be built. The names will be procured. People will perform the temple ordinances. Whether before the millennium or after millennium, it will all be done, will be sealed together as one family of God so that He can bless His children. That's my testimony.
Well, I believe and know what you said is true. And as I always say, it's up to you to find out for yourself. This is Stephen Jones. This is Let's Get Real on Scripture Central.